Welcome everyone to another Crunch Element devlog. This one I'm extremely excited about. Why? Well, it's the new Operations game mode. And I'm excited about that for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones is all that talk that I've been saying for the last year really of building out the foundation, making it solid, and adding content on top of that. Well, now it's here. So what does that mean in the game? Well, there's a new game mode called Operations. And this is a little bit different because the original kind of flagship game mode of Crunch Element was loading up a procedurally generated compound, and there was an objective in there, a single objective, and it was quite fun, but it didn't capture as much of Crunch Element's potential as it could. So what this new Operations mode does is what I hope captures more of that potential. So what it is instead of loading up and just going to one compound, an operation is a series of individual scenarios that are handmade levels, so they each have some sort of unique, shall we say, strategy, scenario, set of objectives, things like that. And what an operation is basically a series of those that also has roguelike progression. So what that means is you create your loadout as usual. You have your attachments, you have your equipment, you have your guns, all of that stuff. You and your squad load up, but the difference is when you go now into the levels, first of all, these in an operation are handmade, but also now there is loot inside of these handmade levels that are random things like scrap, like gears, some tech equipment. And with this new inventory system that I showed last devlog, you can effectively collect all this loot, complete the objectives, and now there's multiple objectives now, which is really cool. And when you complete this level, you salvage all this loot that you have, which turns into credits, because there's now a new economy system. These credits can be transacted into health items, which now there's a new health item. And I do want to add a few more, but now there's one just for testing. You can purchase consumable equipment like wall charges, grenades, and so on, and also purchase magazines. So what this introduces is a new kind of incentive and system, a mechanic to collect things during the level, to cash in at the end of each stage, to kind of reconvene with the squad and see how everybody's doing on gear and so on. Purchase the gear for the next stage, and then move on to that. So health, items, ammunition is all persistent within an operation. So right now there's 3 stages that consist of an operation, but I may want to change that number based on difficulty. And essentially those are picked from a random pool of handmade levels. Right now there are, I believe, 5 or 6, and I do want to add many more, but right now that'll be a good amount to test and to keep things fresh. But it really introduces some dynamic that I was itching for a while, and now seeing that and playing through it is super rewarding because it actually feels like a game, it feels like a journey, and there's a lot of stuff that you're going to find that's buggy, and that's great. And I want to know about that because fixing those by first learning about them is the only way that things can get better. But what I also want to say is now there's nothing that is revolutionary to be added, but it's all evolutionary. So what I mean by that is in order to get to this point with the new operations mode and all these new systems with the economy and with attachments and purchasing and all this, that was a revolutionary update. And I don't say that to like sound, very visionary. That's not the point. The point is that required scrapping some part of the behind the scenes project and rebuilding something. But now that all that is done, which takes so much time and is boring and there's not much to talk about and it's very silent and quiet, now that all those systems are done, now it's about evolutionary updates, incremental stuff, of polish, of bug fixes. And those are much easier to do, and those are much faster to implement and turn around rather than saying, this interaction could be better. Well, that requires scrapping something and spending months on creating a whole new system, which is not fun, and it's not fun to the players, it's not fun to the community. Luckily all those are done. So now it's about evolutionary updates, incremental updates, based on all the feedback and all the stuff that you guys find that is not fun, that is wrong, that doesn't work. I want to know about that so it can be fixed. So where do I see all this going? Well, there's a saying, it's quite popular, if you left it up to engineers, no car would ever get off the assembly line. And the same thing is true with development of any sort. But now I think that the scope is well defined. The game on a high level is where I want it to be, and now it's about polishing that and making everything that exists the best of the best. So one of my highest priorities going forward is focusing on the enemies and the enemy systems and the AI, because I haven't touched that for months because of all the other work that went into operations and interaction and networking, which required way more work than I initially thought, but now it's at a good place. So going forward, number one priority is enemies and improving the AI and the animation and things like that. Number two is performance and making it run really great and really smooth. Now, I have done some testing and baselines, and all those biggest performance bottlenecks are actually with the enemy systems. So that's good news to all the people who think it's always destruction or it's lighting or something. That's not it. It's the enemies. So that's why enemies are my number one priority. I would also like, in terms of new features, which I really want to spend time on making what now exists really polished, really great. But in terms of new features, I think adding progression, global progression, would add a lot of value. So what global progression is basically unlocking base weapons, base attachments outside of an operation or outside of a scenario that is unlocked by, say, getting a certain number of kills or completing challenges, stuff like that, that you permanently unlock those that are outside of a kind of local progression of an operation. So that's something I think would add a lot of value. I also like the idea of having the handmade stages, and I'm just going to call them static stages. I don't know why handmade is a thing. It doesn't make sense, but static stages, stuff that's not procedural. I actually was playing around with the idea of making those unlockable when you actually visit them, or maybe when you visit and complete them in an operation, so that you can then go back and complete it for challenge. And that's the other thing I want to add, which is statistics for time, for kills, for like best scores, for quickest objective thing, stuff like that, that I think would introduce some really interesting dynamics. But so global progression, stuff like unlocking base weapons and attachments, stuff like unlocking stages for replay value and to almost treat it as like challenge scenarios, because when you get good at the same scenario, especially with a squad, things can get interesting with playing around with different tactics and so on. And finally, I would just like to end with really a big thank you to everybody who has tested, who has provided feedback, especially in the Discord, where let's say there's a 3 or 4 month really under the hood update where the end result is not sexy. It's not gratifying from the player's perspective, but it's so necessary to allow the things that are now implemented, like the new objectives, like the new operations mode, like the new loot system and economy and all of this stuff. It required those periods of deep head down work, but now that's no longer the case. As I said, it's all very incremental now, and it's about polishing the existing systems. So I'm looking forward to your feedback. I'm looking forward to you telling me what's wrong with it, what doesn't feel good, where are the bugs, because that's the only way it gets better. And it might be discouraging to see all this stuff, but trust me, now more than ever, it's easier to fix those things since they're on the surface level, they're with polish and things like that. So I want to hear your thoughts on the note board, on the YouTube comments, on the Discord, because I'm looking forward to a really great winter season with this game and all of the new systems, and getting your feedback on it so that this game could be everything it can be. So thank you for sticking with it. I look forward to hearing your feedback as always, and have a great day.